Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is episode 3 for us. We're excited to have this conversation with friends.
Yay.
With friends. This is Dr. Jeffrey and Amy Ulrich. They used to be our backyard neighbors.
Yep.
Now they live on the other side of the world.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So through the power of satellite technology, I guess, we're able to have this conversation, and it's really exciting for us. Jeffrey is a psychologist,
Yep.
and Amy spends her time as an author, and together they lead a ministry called Growing Connected. Did I say that right?
Yep.
You got it.
Yeah, I got it. growingconnected.com. You can find out a whole lot more information about them, but you're going to learn a lot today from them, their wisdom, and their experiences, and even have a chance to buy their book, which is incredible.
Yep.
And I wanted to kind of give some shout outs. These are not my shout outs. These are bigger names than
All right.
than me, that's for sure. But one, Brian McLaren said this, guys, you know this, but this was pretty big deal. Where previous generations of parents referred to books by Spock, Dobson, or Chapman, future generations will refer to Ulrich and Ulrich, cool name by the way, as one of the books that every parent should read. That's a big shout out right there. And then Nicole Schwartz, I'm not gonna read her whole quote. The first word is what really resonated with me. She just said, finally. And there's a whole lot more that she unpacked there, but
Praise,
that statement said a lot about the impact that this information has. So they wrote a book called The 6 Needs of Every Child.
Yes.
And you can pick it up everywhere. Is it everywhere now?
It's everywhere.
It's
Yeah. You should be
Everywhere. You can pick it up anywhere you want.
Woohoo.
But we'd love to just kind of give you a second, as much time as you need really, to help us understand what the 6 needs are. There's some imagery in here about the compass,
Right.
and would love for you to unpack that. But before you get into all of that, maybe help us understand what the goal of the book is. Is it a strategy? Is it a guide? Is it a
Right.
theory? Is it a tool? How do you describe it?
I just want to say, backyard neighbors, we have so many fond memories. I can't believe we're doing this from the other side of the world.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
Yeah. So this book, our lives have intersected raising children, young children, and they're growing up now. It's hard to believe they're becoming young adults, but it's a journey. I think, especially when we have little kids, parenting can feel so intense and like such a pressure, and we want to get it right today. And there's plenty of books out there that tell us what we need to be doing right now to make sure it's all going to turn out well. And that's a lot of pressure. And a lot of books, our experience has been create more pressure for parents rather than freeing them up into the journey that we would believe God has set them on with this person, this unique person in the world. So I think really the goal for me was with Amy's voice in particular, help to write a book that would give shape or form to being on this journey, recognizing that there are no formulas really to get it right, being set free from that, but having something concrete to use to help.
Right. And it's interesting. So Jeffrey and I met when Jeffrey was a graduate student at the University of Virginia and I was an undergrad. So I kind of feel like I went to graduate school along with him because we spent so many years discussing these concepts. And so he was studying the science of connection. So attachment research, brain development, child development research, and how it all comes together to show us what it means to be human. And he was particularly working with a lot of foster and adoptive families, both before he graduated, before he had his PhD, and then after working at the Child Parent Attachment Clinic at the University of Virginia. And so it was so fascinating to be on the receiving end of listening to this science and thinking about that would mean as we raised our own children, what it meant for the families he was working with, what it meant for my understanding of myself, and then who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be. And that sense just grew as we had kids. So as we had children, we started to see, oh, this really matters. This really makes a difference in how we respond, particularly to the hard moments. The good moments, I feel like the science that Jeffrey's found frees us up to enter in and just enjoy. And then the hard moments shows us how to get through it and reconnect to be on this. So I think that what I hope for the book is that it's almost like a map or a guidebook. It doesn't tell you where to go. It just says, this is what to expect along the way. And if you're over here in this section, it's going to be bumpy for a while, but that's not the whole map. That's not your whole journey. So that's our hope for the book.
That's good.
Well, and I love, I've listened to a couple of y'all's podcasts, and obviously I read the book as soon as it showed up. I think I just sat down in your chair and was like, and I'm in. But I love that, I mean, just it starts out, the heart of it is, not what do we do, right? Because that's what we're all asking ourselves. And I don't think that changes. Like you said, with younger kids, and then as they get older, like we're just constantly like, well, what do we do now? But how shall I be with this person? Because to me, that implies it's about the relationship. And for us, what we've seen in the work that we do is that it all comes back to relationships. Transformational, like life change stuff happens through relationships. And our kids, that parenting role should be one of the most important, right?
I think that's hard maybe I'm just for me, but maybe it's hard for a lot of people to make that shift from how do I be, from what do I do to how do I be, because it seems maybe it's just the way that we were raised, but there were the Spocks, and the Chapmans who kind of laid it out and said, if you do this and then you do this and you do this, then you'll have this child who is like this. And that's how I was raised. And so when it came time to raise our own children, there seemed to be a formula that I should just start working. And then I got kind of stuck in the formula and had a hard time just being. And I think I still struggle with the just being part. Maybe it's because I'm more doing oriented, but some of it is just early training, in the way that you should raise children. And so it was kind of it was almost refreshing, to say, okay, leave all of that stuff behind, and let's just maybe, like you said, let's make it a little simpler. Let's take some of the burden off and just be.
And what you're pointing out too, Randall, is how we get to where our starting point as parents in whatever form is influenced both by how it went for us, our own personalities and temperament, and what we learned from our own caregivers. And it's also influenced by our culture, by the messages we get from the parents to our left and our right and those who've been ahead of us. And so some of these things, are harder because they go deeper, because it's like in your bones, like relationship was done in a certain way, and it might be doing focused, or rule focused. That can be a lot harder than if you realize, wait a second, my gut tells me I want to dig into connection and relationship, but my culture is telling me I need to do something. That can be easier because you're just like, oh, I don't have to do it that way. I have permission to just go with my gut, which is to connect. And I may need to fill in some of the details about what that means or looks like. So people will interact with the book from different places for sure.
And it's interesting. When we started dreaming about the book, I was just going to be supporting Jeffrey to pull together the science, and he was going to write it on his own. But then over the years of having kids, I realized we'd have a difficult interaction, and I would respond to my kids in some way, and I would immediately feel these waves of shame or guilt, or like I was doing something wrong, and I could almost picture parenting books on my shoulder or messages from my own childhood being like, well, that was the wrong move, Amy. Well, you probably messed them up. These things of like, no, we need something different. So I hope that the stories that I tell of just our family interactions are also helpful. And I did try to throw myself under the bus a little bit because we're all human. It's like, I get mad at my kids, or I have meltdowns myself. They have meltdowns. Things are disappointing, all these things. It doesn't mean that it's not beautiful. And it doesn't, but I just really want to release people from the shame that for whatever reason really does seem to accompany us on this parenting journey and steals a lot of the joy that really could be with us.
Yeah.
There was one story that you shared that I've just felt like I was there, right? where you were trying to leave. Josh didn't want to leave. And you felt, I don't know exactly what you described as your emotion, but when I was in that with you as you were telling the story, I felt this embarrassment, like my friend thinks that I am, and I really wanted that friendship, and I think that's what you were talking about in that story. But I think that there was always this act right kind of mentality or value growing up, and I definitely carry that into adulthood, and have reprimanded my children or given them the cold shoulder, more times than I care to admit, because of that. And I don't know. I think the stories were freeing, and being able to to humanize my or to normalize my feeling in those moments was pretty valuable.
Yeah.
Out of the book, just feeling like, oh, I'm not the only one who's done this.
Right.
That's really encouraging to hear. Yeah. And what's so funny is, so I was having my own meltdown while Josh, who was 4 at the time, had his meltdown, and then all that transpired with that, because I cared so much about what this other mom thought of me. And now I look at my almost 17-year-old son, who is just such a delight in my life. It's not like everything is perfect, but I just think about, if I was imagining who he is now, the way that I talked to him then because of my own shame or embarrassment, I never would. So it's just that whole try, especially because parenting young ones is so hard. It's just so hard. And so just trying to offer that, like, we're a little further on the journey and it just gets better. And just seeing this fully formed, worthy of dignity person in front of you who's struggling in this moment because their little brains are they're not
under
ready
development.
yet.
And the thing that is always, like, when I think about that from a theological frame, that moment or that message, that me as a parent should have, I really need to have my child's behavior sorted, set, under control, because if I don't, what that means for later is precarious, right? Yeah. So we have to get it right early so that it'll go well later. That's kind of a theme of that whole behavioral focused message. And when we have these fancy terms, biblical terms, sanctification, or we are all being transformed into the likeness of Christ. I take from that we are on a journey toward becoming the thing that we are called to be, right? God does not expect me to show that I've been transformed today for later. He is bringing me along in that, right? And that's exactly how it goes for our children. So the question becomes, how do we enter into that transformation process? And that's where the relationship matters so much. Because if I disconnect with my child in order to prove that he's got it right now, behavioral control, Jesus talking about whitewashed tombs, like we can be people who look like we have it together, but on the inside we're a mess, right? And he's saying that's not the goal, to look like you've got it right. It's to be transformed from the inside out. And that's what the science shows. And to me, that fits what I think a theology of sanctification and transformation across the lifespan looks like. So we have to give I want people to have permission to enter into that long journey of becoming who we are meant to be in Christ. And I hope the book gives people some kind of way of, oh, how can I enter into that practice? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
for sure.
So the book's called Six Needs of Every Child. Can you just kind of briefly tell us the six needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do, because of your audience, is a special connection I feel talking to you guys about this, because we were in Virginia together, and I, when I graduated from UVA, became a fellow at the Child Parent Attachment Project. So a lot of this work begins with your community. We at that clinic were contracted with social service organizations across the state to serve families like you have. And we were bringing the science of attachment to the study and clinical support of those families. And that is the basis of this book. The broad basis is that over 50 years of research and attachment. And we did all sorts of fancy things, videotaping families, and that resource is, I think, still available to some families in Virginia. But yeah, this book was, how do you take that really scientific, long assessment clinic process and translate it into real life that you could maybe run with? So that's what we tried to do, and that's what I tried to do. And that attachment framework basically has two hinges. One is human instinct for exploration, to go out in the world and to discover and master it, and human instinct to draw into a refuge of safety with someone, because you're not big and strong enough to take on the world yourself, and the world gets really hard and scary and dysregulated. So the six needs are built on those two movements that all of us, not just our kids, but us, carry within us. And there are three needs for each of those moves. The three moves for exploration are delight, support, and boundaries. The three moves for refuge seeking are protection, comfort, and equipping.
And so we arranged all these needs into a compass, so that people could get a sense of the directional pull and the movements that parents, Jeffrey calls them couples, a parent and child, have together. So a child is going to want to go out and explore their world. You'll see that as a baby, just how they look all around and they reach for things. A toddler paddles away. Teenager wants the keys to your car. But then we also are wired to come back when things get hard. A baby will startle, or a toddler will sometimes only get a few feet away from you and then want to come right back. So it's both, and the ability to go out and come back, and the different needs that a child has. Once we become aware of them, we can just meet them in that relationship so much more easily. And so again, to go out and explore their world, there is that delight, send them off with delight, supporting them in their exploration. Boundaries, because they need to know how far is too far. And then when they run into trouble, the protection, what does this child need to be safe right now? The comfort to see their suffering, and then the equipping. All right, let's figure out what happened, what went wrong before you're able to go out again. And what we hope is that you're going to know your kid. You're going to know because kids need to be able to do both. Well, you might have a child who wants to run far, but not be able to come back and seek the things that they need to seek for refuge, which is also how they build health and resiliency. So you might need to maybe open yourself up a little bit more.
Right.
And you might have a kid who has a real tough time going out and exploring, and maybe you then would need to open up opportunities for them to go.
So on the compass, the needle also has two parts, right?
Yeah.
And they move independently.
Right.
Right. So there's what your kid actually needs, and they don't necessarily know it. It's not like they're carrying around, oh, what I need right now is
I
this.
need you to delight in me.
They're just doing their thing. And what they may even label as their need, if they could, may not be actually what they need. That's a bit of a mystery. And it's really together we're going to it's up to us together to solve that. And insofar as it is a mystery, sometimes it's straightforward, but a lot of times it's not straightforward.
Right.
And the issue is that what I may guess or where I may want to go based on what I see in the moment may be actually in the opposite direction of what your kid actually needs at that moment. And now we're going to experience disconnection because we're pointing in two different directions.
Right. And something that a needle cross situation that we have a lot, and we had a lot in our house, particularly when the kiddos were little, was one of the kids would act out about something. And he's just having a big storm somewhere, kitchen floor, wherever. And I just wanted to stop, because the way that I grew up was like, you don't have these kinds of outbursts, like just stop it. So I want to give him a boundary, just stop, right? Well, what I'm learning is, okay, so what this kid actually needs is this level of meltdown because of a little thing is an indication that there's probably something bigger going on. So taking a few minutes to stop and comfort, saying, I'm here, I see you're really struggling, do we need to talk about something, makes this space that pulls us back together. Now, that doesn't mean that boundaries are never appropriate, but what that means is that the science and the compass gave me eyes to see, oh, there might be something else going on that actually, if I can figure that out, it's going to get us back on track and back connected much more quickly than if we just kept escalating the conflict.
So you mentioned the families that we serve. They're almost all foster and adoptive families. Some of them are biological families in crisis.
Right,
but
vulnerable families.
Yeah, for the adoptive and the foster families particularly, they don't have the history with the child to have this sort of groundwork done to know why this child is responding necessarily. So
and they don't know, right? Like you said, Jeffrey, that
the child
doesn't know. And we would see that in what we would call like a neurotypical child that has no issues with attachment. So to expect a child that has multiple layers of trauma and attachment and not in a stable situation, for them to know how they're feeling is really, really hard. And what I love about these 6 needs is it's enough to covers everything, right? But it doesn't overwhelm you. So we can look at that and say, in this moment, this person who really is a stranger, right? This is how they're responding, but this is what I think they need, and just, try it and adjust from there. Yeah. But like we say, because we have 3 bio kids, like the other day right now, COVID, we get time kind of alone together in the car, right? So we go and we drive in the car and we put the little girls in the back seat and they nap. And our big kids stay home and everybody gets a little space. So we just started doing this, but we'll have these talks in the car, and our kind of terminology for our kids is where are they being a little spicy? And so, it's just like, ooh, a little bit spicier than normal. And so that's what, like, we had our car date this week. And so that was kind of the topic of conversation. Why do you think so-and-so is being a little spicy? And it's like, they aren't able to say, even as bigger kids, they're probably not able to tap into like kind of the complex layers of emotions, but this is what I think's going on. And this is what I think, maybe they need. And, he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is like what they're struggling with. Yeah. But yeah, for these families that we work with, or even for our younger girls, nonverbal, still struggling with attachment and anxiety, even just knowing, like, for either party to know what the need is, I think is a challenge.
Yeah. Do you have some guidance?
I mean, the hopes of the compass too is that there's and trying to break out of this idea is there's a right and wrong answer to the thing is like, well, let's try delight. Like, let's just pour delight into these little people for a while and see if that gets us through this. Oh, that didn't work. We're still struggling. Well, let's swing over here and try this. So sometimes, just as a human being, I like limited options. So it also gives you like, I'm going to throw a dart in this direction and see what comes.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and I love to, a lot of times in the world of attachment and working with kids, like, so if you've taken any, from our side of it, if you've had any kind of classes on like how to approach your new children in your home, they say like the 3 C's, right? So you need to they need to calm down, and then you need an opportunity to connect with them, and then is your opportunity to correct. So like trying to correct the behavior that you're seeing is down on the list until you've helped them kind of feel safe and secure, and then you've connected with them. They're trying to connect is just, I mean, trying to correct is just not going to work. And I've heard it said, I think it was Karen Purvis, but she kind of gets everything for attachment, right? So like, but it was basically rules without relationship don't work. And so when we get, especially when we get, bigger kids in homes, these homes have these rules and the kids aren't following the rules. And then there's these whole like, well, we gave a consequence and they just didn't even seem to care. And it's like, well, yeah, they don't because they're not connected to you to care, to follow the rules. And I think that's one of the big challenges we see with families is how to deal with those behaviors, basically.
Yeah, we obviously we're talking about the book in terms of the context of biological parents who have begun the journey with their children from day one. And that is a different set of circumstances than you are dropping into a relationship at day.
Right.
Yeah.
So to come back, this book was born out of working with those families for whom either it's gone really badly from day one, they're still maybe working on it, or they've had to start over, the kids and a caregiver. So those issues around foster or adoption, I think the important things to keep in mind is those needs still exist. They're hardwired into us. Even if there's not connection, your child is still carrying the need for delight, support, boundaries, protection, comfort, equipping. What you're raising, Kelly, is the question is, how do I become an instrument of meeting those needs, all 6 of them? And to your point, I have to be strategic about how I'm going to approach those 6 needs. Because if I jump in at a certain point, like boundaries, rules, that's my starting point. Yeah, that's going to end badly. Because there is that connection hasn't yet been formed. So it begs the question, well, how does connection form? And that's mostly an emotional experience. So the 2 of those 6 needs, delight and comfort, we call them mirroring needs.
Right.
Karen will talk about mirroring, but it's very emotional. It is kind of plugging into each other's emotional systems when we engage in those 2 needs. So delight's on the explore side, comfort's on the distress side. We get a lot of the distress side with these kids often. Certain kids, they're just dysregulated. Part of becoming or ending up in foster and adoption is they haven't had somebody regulating their internal turmoil. So they come to us easily dysregulated. And then there'll be other reasons too, if they, as you know, in utero traumas and their nervous systems just are a wreck to begin with. So that comfort piece is a big part of those 6 needs. Comfort's a big step in for trying to lay some groundwork in a new relationship.
Right. I've heard you talk about, I was just going to say, I've heard you talk that you feel like that's the most important need because that is the need that is lacking, at least in our kind of society structure. That's where we don't understand it. It's hard, whatever. And so that's where, that kind of the heart of maybe not the most important need, but the neediest need. Is that a word? Is that a descriptor?
Well, it's the most uncomfortable. It's, in a broad sense, it's the most uncomfortable position on that compass dial.
For a parent.
For everybody. None of us like that feeling of dysregulation. And human beings are designed to pick up feelings from other people. They are contagious. So if you're crying, I am my nervous system is resonating with that distress.
Right.
I mean, there are some people, and God bless these, especially in the foster adoption, who just have this innate ability to remain calm when there's chaos.
Yeah,
That is not me. That is not most people.
Right.
They have a special gift. For most of it, it's really hard to be in a place where there's dysregulation next to somebody. So that can be, I think, a number one challenge. But even in like our families, we've grown up together, it's still a challenge, partly because in that case, I care so much about this person. I see their distress. I don't want them to be hurting for their sake and for mine.
Right.
Yeah, comfort's a tough one, but it's unavoidable. We have to find a way to make peace with it somehow.
And we have to make time for it, right? Because it's not the doing that we're programmed, or so many of us are inclined to do. So to take time to just see your child, to delight in them, to take time to sit with their pain without trying to fix it, to just be present with the pain without jumping ahead to, and the next time we're going to do this differently, or
I think that kind of is my default. I mean, I see it now in the last few years, I think, and to try to provide comfort first, but my correcting is like 100 miles an hour, and I have to hold it back.
Yeah,
right?
your boundary setting is jumping in real fast.
It's really easy for me to say, do you know why that happened? What could you do differently next time? And like, it's like, pat. Okay, how you feeling? Great. Do you know why that happened? It's like, there's not enough space between for me, I think. And I think, that's probably why our kids go to her for comfort than they do me.
But it's so important that you're aware of that. I'm that way too. Like, I can have the dialogue. I need to stick with the comfort, stick with it. But I'm like, I want to keep, and what you're talking about is that move to equipping. That is one of the most common, there's comfort and equipping. They're right next to each other in the dial. And we often want to move as quickly as possible to the comfort, especially if we're discomforted by the need for comfort, and get to the equipping. It's just the challenge of like, if I want my equipping to be to brought on board by my kid truly and deeply, I have to spend enough time in the comfort for them to allow that information to come in. Otherwise, it'll go in and bounce off, right? Because they're just not in the mental space to receive the good thing. Because what you want to give them is good. That's not a bad thing. It's an important need. It's just we want our children to make the most use of it as possible. And that will often require more time in the comfort zone than some of us, like you and I, maybe want to spend.
Right. Well, and we attended a crisis, like a parenting kids in trauma, in crisis. We attended a workshop a couple of years ago, and that was really the heart of he was like, you want to boil it down to a quick fix that you can leave tonight and to start. It's all about comfort. It is literally about sharing you have to be in a regulated space. So you have to be regulated, but once you are regulated, you literally share that with your child. So you sitting together, comforting your child, not in a time of distress. So they're calm. It's not, you don't wait for, like, oh, I've fallen or I've hurt myself or I'm upset or I'm scared or whatever, but just start the day off and then check in at some point in the middle of the day and then end the day with just sitting together and comforting them, because it builds that healthy attachment, but also it literally helps them regulate their brains. And so that, he said, you need to do this and prioritize it, and you do it every day for 18 months and you'll start to see, which feels really overwhelming when you're, a parent and you're like, whoo, 18 months, like really, that's a lot. But it was great. And, we left there and we're like, okay, well, let's, we came for this, for work, for training for work. But we were like, hey, this could probably help one of our kids. And so we came home that night, I think, and started it. And now we probably are like right at 16 months post. And we do, and we see the days that we don't prioritize prioritize that comfort because we've still got the little dysregulated, that amygdala like takeover, right? Still crisis, fight or flight situations for their little mind, that the regulation is such an important part of the day, and it all goes back to comfort, just helping her feel safe.
Yep.
And so, that's been huge. And that's really where we tell people to, anytime we talk with a family who's struggling, we just kind of pull it back to there and say, this is where you got to start, I think.
Yeah. We're obviously a two-parent household like you,
right.
But not all households are two-parent households. Mm-hmm. So how important is it for each parent to be good at all 6 of these? I'm asking, can I like get off the hook on some of the... Yeah.
You outsource comfort?
Yeah. So...
This doesn't sound very promising.
It's advantageous. At the end of the day, it's advantageous if both of you can do both, right?
Right.
Like, the metaphor I was thinking about as you're talking, Kelly, is here's the tension that I see in families in what you're saying, which I agree with. Like that's just the way it is. If we're just speaking biologically, that nervous system is behind in its development.
Right.
And if you're going to catch it up to the extent that that nervous system of your child can catch up and self-regulate, self-comfort, saying we had in the clinic was co-regulation leads to self-regulation. What that means is I do it with you. And as I do that enough, then you do it within yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
That's good.
There's just there's no other pathway to get to self-regulation. So, but the problem is in a family system, it's like the rest of our family, let's say, I can go 60 down the highway and I can get a lot done. In fact, I've got a lot of things scheduled. I need to get to, this exit and that exit. And I've got one kid who's only able to go 15 miles an hour. And like, you feel that pressure, but I need to be able to go 60. I've got these other things going on.
Right.
But what to do about the one who's going 15? And we get frustrated because I have to slow down to their speed to get them to speed up. And that only happens over a long period of time, that 18 months you're talking about. And at the end of 18 months, I can't know for sure whether their top end speed is going to be 40 or 60 or maybe 30.
Yep.
But I say that to say, in 2-person families, 2-parent or 2-caregiver, or if it's extended family, the advantage of it is I can say to you, one member of that family is spending time going 15 while the other member is doing those things at 60 that need to be done. And then if we can hand off, you spend some time at 15 and then we trade off, that's very helpful. If only one person can do that 15 mile per hour work, then that just depends on the dynamics of your family, but that can create a strain because now, that takes a lot of, and 15 seems like a break, but it actually is more work, right? It's training. So these are family system challenges that there's no right or wrong. There's just trade-offs. So,
Yeah. Well, and I want to jump, we talked a lot about comfort, and you had said, the other side of that is delight. So those are both mirroring needs, right? You're seeing your child, and I think, I can't remember now which one of you said it, but towards the end of the book, just that there's an excellent resource at the very end of this book that where you can evaluate each other, which historically usually ends poor for us, right? Where we evaluate each other because you're highlighting deficits and you're like, this doesn't feel real good. But we did really well. I think we did really well with that.
It was a lot of personal therapy for me to identify some of these things. So.
But what I saw when we were going through that, we kind of also looked at it from the lens of how would a foster and adoptive parent maybe deal with it in that moment. So to kind of jump to the other side of comfort, the delight, I think one of you said that you can't really overdo this one, right? At the end of the book, it was like, where do I under respond and where do I over respond? And maybe delight is that area that you maybe don't no one maybe is at risk of over responding and delighting of your child, because it's not like you're the most perfect human being ever, but it is, you are so wonderfully made just as you are. So you're affirming, I mean, for us, and I know that this is my daily prayer, is that my kids are confident in their identity in Christ, right? So when we delight in them, we're delighting in their identity in Christ. And like you said at the beginning, Jeffrey, that's not who this person you will one day be, but that is who you are right now, that we still find so much delight in. And I think, at least for adoptive and foster families, this is maybe where they're going to see some wins with that behavior modification, because when you delight in a child, and you know, like we talk about, like if this is the behavior that you want to see done with, so like whining or hitting or whatever, then delighting in the positives, right, is a way that you're going to start to see, I think, improvement. At least what we've seen is, and because like kids, we know they like that negative attention, because negative attention is usually bigger. So we talk about like, just, a lot of positive attention so they don't resort to negative attention. But even a lot of positive attention, like that negative attention, is a bigger response. And a lot of time kids, especially we've got the kids with RAD, like the reactive attachment disorder, they really crave those big responses. So looking at those behaviors and really honing in on like, this is what we want to just delight in. Like, we see you being so kind, and we know that as a part of your spirit because we see that. So I think that's where there's hope maybe for adoptive and foster families, that there's never too far gone, right? You can find something, and I think in the book you'll say, like, if you can't start with delight, because let's be real, like there are times where we don't delight. And like there are seasons where it is hard maybe to find that delight, but start with gratitude. I'm grateful for this in my child, and let them hear you say it as well. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, that is that's an important point, that with our biological children, we've been delighting in them since the first moment. And that really is building an account against which we draw to do those harder things, like in the boundary section. We can say hard things to our kids who we have known from day one and been delighting in from day one, because it's drawing against that store of our kids who've come to us, and we don't have that relational store of delighting moments. And then we go in and try and say a hard thing. You're like, no thanks. I'll take a pass. I don't need to deal with that.
Right.
So you're talking about like building an account up so that you can draw against it when there will be times that you need to say, what's going on is not okay, and I need to tell you straight up it's not okay. And this is what needs to happen because of it, whatever the boundaries look like. And yeah, look, for so many of these kids, and I'm thinking especially the older kids, there's a lot to admire. When you think their stories and how they have survived them, and continuing to survive their hard story, there's a lot to admire, and I think even delight in their perseverance, their the life within them that strives to make good out of their life, even if it's problematic how they're going about it. So yeah, finding it whatever we can to reflect back that we believe in them, believe in their story. We see things that maybe nobody has named for them is huge.
Oh yeah.
I think that there are two things that can really get in the way of both, especially of our delight, but also of our comfort. And it's, do we feel delighted in ourselves? Do we feel that we ourselves are worthy of love? Do we believe that God looks at us and says, wow, look at you, my daughter, my son, I want to dance over you with joy? Because if we don't, it's so hard to see and delight in that. So I also believe that there is space, there is a lot of personal work that can be done to feel like, could I just sit with this idea that I am loved, and then see what might open up. in you as you're able to interact with your kids. And then I think fear, the question that when I'm having the hardest moments with my kids, what Jeffrey says to me is, what are you scared of? And so much of my interactions in the moment have to do with fears that I have in the future for what might become of my kids. And I write in the book about my own family has really pretty severe mental health disorders and histories, and a lot of pain that's come from that. And so I've had to really recognize when my in the moment response to my child is because of a terror of what might become of him, and what I'm seeing as a manifestation of a lot of comfort. We had one little guy who was pretty dysregulated for a long time, longer than you would think, and he would scream. I hate you, or you're the worst mom ever, scream and flailing, and couldn't be touched, couldn't be anything. And there's that part of me that, one, you're just like, should I let him say these things? Like, I feel like this seems like we need to bring but then I know how the parent, I know how it has gone to harshly parent kids who have some of these some of these issues. So I would just sit on the floor a room away or I don't know, 10 feet away, and just say, I'm here. Because kids don't actually, they're saying these words, they don't know what they mean. I'm hearing these words in a way that hurts or is, I think that he means it, but they don't, they're just, what I tried to picture was like, he's screaming, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain. And so I would just
so vital.
And try not to think about it, and just pray that God would be with me in the moment, and just stay close. And inevitably, it might be 25 minutes, but he would crawl over and crumble, and then we could hug. But it was shutting my mouth and just be present, and taking my fear about what was going on to God, believing that God loved this little person as much as I do, and as much as God loves me.
Yeah. Well, Kelly mentioned the back of the book, which really could have been a second book, because of the value of it. The kind of the survey, or the workbook, the assessment piece of it all. And I know there were a couple of them where I found myself in the extremes, and I was like, well, that doesn't seem that extreme. And then I was like, oh, maybe that's me then.
He's like, that was me. And that very first question about under responding.
Like, I don't think that's bad. Oh, right.
Okay.
Maybe I should pay attention here.
Right.
But I think for the listeners, for those who would pick up the book, that's one of the most valuable pieces of the whole thing. Excuse me. Is being able to kind of walk through that now with some practical tools. And so that's in the back of the book. I really think you sold yourself short by not selling it as a separate piece, but I do. It's so valuable that that I hope people would continue through that part. Is there anything else that you want us to know, that you want our listeners to know about the book, and some concepts that maybe we haven't talked about, or anything like that?
Yeah. So to add to that, the 6needs.com. So that's the book link. You can also find it through the Growing Connected website, under the book link there. But the opportunity to do some in-depth study material around these needs, I think, could be really valuable, either as in a group with other parents that you trust to be vulnerable with in particular, or as a couple, or just individually. Because we really do believe God wants to do a work in us as well as our children. And I hope that comes across in the book. This isn't about just your child. It's about you and your child and what God is doing in both of your lives. And so I think I just really encourage folks, if you're ready for that sort of exploration, I think I would really encourage folks
and those materials, if you just enter in your purchase information on the Growing Connected book page, so the6needs.com, and you'll get a written form of that curriculum online to follow along.
Awesome. Wow. Well, we'll make sure to include links for that in the description of all this stuff so that they can find where to go to get all that.
I want to say is good enough parenting. It's good enough.
Right.
Let's just celebrate, that we're in it here trying. And that is what science shows matters. We're in it here trying and loving.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We talk about that a lot, that love, that especially when you are loving a child from a hard place, that can be difficult. And so love does not have to be that feeling, right? It's not that lovey-dovey feeling like you were saying that you have when you hold a baby and they smell so good and they're so sweet and they're asleep and they give that little smile and whatever. It literally is just the commitment to keep showing up. And I'm doing my best. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to get it wrong, probably a lot, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm committed, and I'm just going to keep showing up. And I can't remember who it was that said sometimes love just looks like a safe place, comfort, food. You're helping meet those needs and then slowly wearing away at the emotional stuff.
Yeah. So our hope is to be able to use the book and the work, do the self-evaluations at the end and all of that for all of our families because of how valuable it will be for them in the process of bringing children into their home, whether it's for a few months or if it's permanently, to understand. And even for the biological children that they have in the home, or children that they whether they are planning to foster or adopt or not, they are parents of children in the home, and they need to know how to best love and care for these kids. It's such a valuable resource. We want to make it available to all of our families as they go through their journeys. And for us and for me in particular, it has been cheap therapy that has done what about 6 sessions worth probably would have unpacked. So
small thing.
So thank you for that.
Hear that. So excited to work with you and your families, and just really are grateful for everything that you're pouring into the world. It is hard work.
Well, we're thankful for you too, and as soon as you can leave New Zealand and come back, we'll make sure that we find a house next door.
Wouldn't that be a dream?
Right.
It would be. Well, thank you guys for your time
so
and for making this happen across the world, and thank you for the years of investment that you've made into this work and for putting it in such a beautiful format for us and for families to benefit from. So we love you guys.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.